Usually when we talk about physical spaces, we think of walls.
Right, yeah. Walls, doors, maybe a feeling.
Exactly. Like a room is a room. It has fixed dimensions. You can measure the square footage. You can paint the drywall.
You know exactly where it ends and where the rest of the world begins.
Right. But I mean, have you ever felt trapped in a room that you couldn't actually see?
Oh, wow.
Like
Yeah.
a narrow room of your own making. It's that visceral, paralyzing feeling where you restrict your own actions.
Yeah, that hesitation.
Yeah, like hesitating to book a flight to the other side of the world or, stopping yourself from wearing an outfit you absolutely love.
Or even just keeping your mouth shut in the meeting.
Right.
But
Simply because you are terrified of what other people might think. You basically build a cage out of their hypothetical opinions.
it is a profoundly common experience.
Yeah.
It's something that dictates the trajectory of millions of lives.
Totally.
We build these invisible walls around ourselves, and the bricks are made entirely of anticipated judgment.
Just completely constructed from what we think others are thinking.
Exactly. We shrink our world down to this tiny, manageable, predictable space, and we do it all just to avoid the imagined scrutiny of strangers.
Wow.
We trade our autonomy for the illusion of safety.
It is exhausting to live that way. I mean, truly. And that is exactly what we are dismantling today.
Yes, we are.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a really fascinating synthesis of research we've pulled together. It covers cognitive science, psychoanalysis, Adlerian psychology, and cognitive behavioral therapy.
It's a really comprehensive look at the issue.
It really is. And we are looking at a literal, actionable roadmap for breaking out of that narrow room. We want to figure out how to step out, how to expand your boundaries, and maybe even take that massive trip across the globe.
Right. And to do it without the heavy, suffocating baggage of self-consciousness.
Exactly. So how do we start?
Well, to set the proper context for this, we need to establish right up front that this isn't just an exercise in, positive thinking.
Okay. No good vibes only.
Right. No, we are not going to sit here and offer platitudes about, being brave or ignoring the haters.
Because that never works anyway.
Exactly. It usually fails because it actually fights against human biology. Instead, we're looking at the mechanical, scientific processes of the human brain.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're talking mechanics.
Yes. This research fundamentally argues that by understanding the specific neurological ways our brains automatically categorize other people, we can actually dismantle the imaginary audience that makes us so self-conscious.
Wait, really? By looking at how we judge others?
Yeah. We are talking about a systematic, step-by-step process of unlocking global freedom of action by hacking your own cognitive machinery.
That is a massive promise. So let's start at the very beginning of that mechanical process.
Okay, let's do it.
If you're out there listening and you're feeling trapped by the judgment of other people, it seems counterintuitive, but the research says we actually have to start by looking inward.
We absolutely do.
We have to look at how our own brains are secretly judging everyone else the second they walk into a room.
That is the foundation of the entire issue right there.
Really?
Yeah. Before we can dismantle the imaginary audience, we have to look at the brain's internal sorting mechanism.
The sorting hat of the brain.
Exactly. And in cognitive science, this mechanism is driven by what we call schemas.
Schemas, okay.
Yeah, schemas are cognitive frameworks. You can think of them as mental shortcuts that our nervous system uses to reduce the overwhelming processing load of reality.
Because if we had to consciously analyze every single detail of every single person or situation we encountered, I mean, their facial microexpressions, their posture, their tone of voice, their clothing choices.
It would be too much.
Yeah, our brains would basically run out of energy and crash, like a computer with too many tabs open.
That's a great way to put it. The brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. It consumes about 20% of your body's caloric intake, despite being a fraction of your body weight.
20%. That's huge.
It is. And
Yeah.
processing novel information is calorically expensive. So, human beings encounter an incalculable amount of sensory data every second.
Right, just walking down the street is overwhelming data.
Exactly. And to survive without burning through all of our glucose reserves, the brain has to be brutally efficient. It has to predict environments rapidly based on highly limited information.
So it uses schemas.
Yes. And the source material outlines 4 specific types of schemas that our brains use to execute this shortcut.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is what cognitive scientists call person schemas.
Person schemas. I imagine this is the gut reaction.
Very much so.
It's like looking at someone and instantly feeling, this person is beautiful or this person looks dangerous.
Yes. And it happens before you even consciously register that you've looked at them.
Wow, so it's totally automatic.
It happens in milliseconds. It is the brain making a snap judgment based almost entirely on outward appearances and first impressions.
Just surface level stuff.
Right. And it relies heavily on historical data and evolutionary wiring. It triggers cognitive biases like the halo effect,
Oh, right, the halo effect. Yeah.
where if our person schema registers someone as physically attractive, our brain automatically, without our permission, by the way, assumes they're also highly intelligent, trustworthy, and kind.
Even though we don't know them at all.
Exactly. We have zero empirical evidence for their kindness, but the schema fills in the blank to save time.
I'm trying to picture how this plays out practically. It feels a bit like doing laundry.
Okay, I like this. Walk me through it.
Well, if I want to be perfectly accurate and treat every piece of clothing with the utmost care, I should read the tiny fabric care label on every single shirt, every single pair of pants, every time I do a wash.
Right. Wash cold, tumble dry low, do not iron.
Yeah, exactly. But nobody does that because it takes 3 hours. So we use a schema. We sort laundry into darks and lights.
That is a perfect analogy.
You dump the darks in, hit normal wash, and hope for the best. It's a fast, efficient strategy to get the job done.
That captures the utility of it perfectly. Evolutionarily speaking, if our ancestors on the savannah saw a large animal with sharp teeth emerging from the brush,
They didn't check the care label.
right, they didn't have the luxury of pausing to read its individual personality. They didn't evaluate if it was having a good day or a bad day.
No time for that.
The brain used a person schema. Sharp teeth equals predator, run. The darks and lights sorting method keeps you alive.
But I'm guessing that breaks down a bit today.
It does. Human interaction in the modern world is vastly more complex than laundry or predators, which is why the text moves on to the second type of cognitive shortcut,
Which is
the role schema.
role schemas. This sounds like it bridges over into social dynamics, like
Yeah.
categorizing people based on their job or their age.
Exactly. It relies heavily on societal constructs. We look at someone's occupation, their age bracket, their gender, their socioeconomic status.
Or even the language they speak.
Yes, and we apply a prepackaged set of beliefs to them. In everyday language, we just call this stereotyping.
Stereotyping, right.
If someone wears a white coat and a stethoscope, your role schema immediately dictates how you interact with them.
You defer to their authority.
Right. You assume they are highly educated, and you might even assume they are wealthy.
And on the flip side, I guess, if you see someone in a tattered jacket sleeping on a park bench, the role schema fires up a completely different set of assumptions.
It absolutely does.
You might assume they are dangerous or lazy or struggling with addiction, and you're completely bypassing the actual narrative of how they got there.
Yes, we fill in their entire life story before they even open their mouths,
And we just do it seamlessly.
without even realizing we're doing it.
Yeah.
But schemas aren't just directed outward. There's a third type that turns this predictive categorizing power inward.
Inward upon ourselves.
Yes, self-schemas. These are the rigid, deeply entrenched beliefs we hold about our own identities.
Oh, man. So it's the narrative you construct about what you are actually capable of.
Exactly.
Like, I'm just not the kind of person who travels alone, or I'm a shy person, I don't speak up in meetings.
Or, I'm bad at math.
Right. We put ourselves into these little categorized boxes just as quickly as we put others into them.
We do, and it serves a similar purpose, you know? It maintains our sense of identity and predictability, but it severely limits our behavioral range.
Because we won't step outside the box.
Right. If your self-schema dictates that you are fragile or that you are inherently awkward, you will subconsciously organize your entire life to validate that schema.
Oh, wow. So you prove yourself right.
Yes. You will avoid parties, you will decline the invitation to travel, and you will stay safely within your narrow room, all to prove your self-schema right.
That's depressing. Is there a fourth one?
There is. Finally, the fourth type outlined in the text is the event schema. These are the predictable scripts and behavioral routines that make daily life efficient.
Event schemas, like the muscle memory of your morning routine.
Exactly.
You know exactly how to walk into your local cafe, stand in the correct line, order your specific coffee, and pay. You don't even have to think about it. The script is already written.
You are operating on autopilot. But the critical downside of an event schema is exposed when you are faced with a totally novel challenge.
Like what?
Imagine you are dropped into a bustling train station in Tokyo.
Oh, boy.
You don't speak Japanese, the ticket machines operate on a system you've never seen before, and the flow of the crowd is completely foreign.
The event schema completely crashes. I mean, I don't have a script for Tokyo train station.
Exactly. And so your brain interprets the lack of a script as active danger.
So I freeze up. I hesitate.
The hesitation is profound because your brain is desperately searching its archives for a relevant event schema and finding nothing.
Just a 404 error?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the core danger highlighted in the cognitive science literature.
Which is?
While these four schemas, person, role, self, and event, are undeniably efficient and kept our ancient ancestors alive, relying on them in modern, diverse, complex societies leads directly to prejudice, isolation, and missed opportunities.
It forces us to completely ignore a person's unique individuality.
Exactly. Furthermore, the text warns about a particularly damaging variation called early maladaptive schemas.
Early maladaptive schemas? That sounds very clinical. What does that actually mean for someone listening to this right now?
It refers to schemas that were formed during childhood to protect you from a chaotic or painful environment.
Okay, so a defense mechanism.
Right. But these schemas are now actively sabotaging your adult life.
Give me an example.
Let's say you had caregivers who are highly critical and emotionally inconsistent. As a child, your brain formed a self-schema that said, I am destined to be rejected.
Heartbreaking.
And a person schema that said, people who claim to love me will eventually betray me.
So it was a survival tactic back then. You learned to expect the rejection so it wouldn't hurt as much when it happened.
Exactly. But here's the tragedy of the maladaptive schema. 30 years later, you are an adult. You meet a wonderful, consistent, loving partner.
But you still have the schema.
Yes. Your brain is still running the old, outdated software. The schema is still active in the background.
So what does that look like?
It actively prevents you from building intimate relationships because you are constantly hypersensitive to the slightest change in your partner's tone.
Predicting betrayal where there is absolutely none.
You sabotage the safe environment because your brain only knows how to operate in the dangerous one.
Okay, this feels a bit bleak, I'm not going to lie.
It's heavy, yes.
We have this ancient, hyper-efficient sorting machine in our heads. It's constantly stereotyping others based on superficial traits. It's limiting our own potential with self-schemas, and sometimes it's running on outdated, traumatizing software from when we were kids.
That's the summary, yeah.
If I am automatically, biologically wired to sort people into darks and lights the second I see them, how on earth do I break that cycle? Do I just have to constantly fight my own brain all day long?
It sounds daunting, but the source material introduces a vital, incredibly practical concept from social psychologist Susan Fiske.
Okay, good. We have a way out.
We do. It is called the continuum model of interpersonal cognition. And what Fiske's model proves is that our cognitive processing isn't a static, unchangeable trap.
It's not permanent.
Right. It operates on a spectrum, or a continuum, and we actually have a steering wheel.
I definitely need a steering wheel. Walk me through this continuum. If I walk into a room and meet someone new, where do I start?
According to Fiske's model, whenever we encounter a new person, every single one of us starts at the exact same place on the continuum.
Which is?
Automatic category-based processing. Your brain instantly, forcefully applies the schemas.
So I just judge them right out of the gate.
You categorize them by their clothes, their perceived gender, their role. You cannot stop your brain from doing this initial sort. It takes milliseconds.
You know, I feel like there's a lot of cultural guilt around that initial judgment. People think, oh, I judge that person based on their outfit. I'm a terrible prejudiced person.
There is a lot of guilt, yes.
But you're saying that initial spark is just involuntary neurology.
It is entirely involuntary. Feeling guilty about the initial category-based processing is like feeling guilty that your pupils dilate in the dark.
Oh, that's a huge relief.
It is an autonomic reflex.
Yeah.
However, and this is the crucial pivot in the continuum model, you don't have to stop there.
Okay. So what's the next step?
Fiske's research shows that if we are motivated to pay attention to that person, if we decide they are relevant to us and we actively engage with them, we can shift our cognitive gears.
We turn the steering wheel.
Exactly. We deliberately move along the continuum away from category-based processing and transition into what she calls piecemeal, or individual-based processing.
Piecemeal processing, meaning I stop looking at the category box I shoved them into, and I start looking at the actual individual pieces of who they are.
Right.
I notice their specific sense of humor, their niche interests, the way they talk about their family.
You gather the individual data points that contradict or refine the initial schema.
So how do I actually do that, like practically?
To deliberately trigger this shift, the text recommends a specific mental technique called decategorization.
Decategorization.
Yes. This is the conscious, active choice to strip away the labels. When you feel your brain saying, oh, this person is just a typical, whatever profession or age group, you have to catch that thought.
You have to notice it first.
You actively pause and remind yourself, this label is just my brain being lazy. It is a cognitive shortcut, not the reality of the complex human standing in front of me.
Okay, going back to the laundry analogy, decategorization is like taking a shirt out of the darks pile, actually looking at it and reading that tiny care label for the first time.
Yes, perfect.
You were saying, wait, this isn't just a dark shirt, this is silk. It needs a completely different approach.
Exactly.
But, let me push back on this for a second. Decategorization sounds absolutely exhausting.
It does take effort.
If I have to do piecemeal processing for every single cashier, barista, and stranger I pass on the subway, my brain is going to overheat anyway. How is this practical?
That is a very valid critique, and Fisk's model actually accounts for it. You don't have to use piecemeal processing for everyone.
Oh, thank God.
Right. If you were just paying for your coffee and leaving, the role schema of barista and customer is perfectly adequate. You treat them with basic politeness, and the schema does its job.
Okay, so I don't need to know the barista's childhood dreams to buy a latte.
Exactly. Piecemeal processing is reserved for interactions where connection, understanding, or collaboration is required. It is a tool you deploy when the stakes are higher than a simple transaction.
Okay, that makes it manageable. I save the high-calorie processing for the people I actually want to connect with. And the text mentions a step after decategorization, right? Recategorization.
Yes, once you decategorize and see the individual pieces, the brain still craves some level of organization. It still wants a framework.
To give it a new word.
Exactly. So you employ recategorization. This involves finding a higher level shared category that encompasses both of you, transcending those initial differences.
Like finding common ground.
Yes. Let's say your initial schema flagged someone as an other, like a foreigner, someone from a completely different political background or a different socioeconomic class. The wall is up.
Right.
Recategorization is the act of finding a shared umbrella. For example, realizing, oh, we are both parents navigating a difficult school system.
Or on a broader scale, we are both global citizens.
Exactly. Or simply, we are both human beings trying to find some peace in a chaotic world.
You find the common denominator. That is incredibly powerful. It shifts the burden of being a perfect, unbiased person.
It really does.
You don't have to magically eradicate all your biases. You just have to be willing to interact, catch your brain being lazy, and update your processing from category to piecemeal.
That's the work.
But this brings up a massive glaring question that connects this to the idea of the narrow room we talked about at the start.
Okay, let's hear it.
If my brain is constantly using these schemas to judge and sort everyone else, what happens when I assume everyone else is using those exact same ruthless schemas on me?
You are hitting on the exact mechanism that generates our social anxiety.
It's a mirror effect.
Yes. When we project our own hyper-categorizing judgmental tendencies onto the world around us, we create what clinical psychology calls the imaginary audience.
The imaginary audience, it's such a perfect term because it perfectly describes the sensation.
It really does.
You walk into a party a little late, or you wear a piece of clothing that's slightly flashier than your usual style, and suddenly the air feels thick.
You feel exposed.
You genuinely feel like there is a theatrical spotlight tracking your every single move, and everyone in the room is a theater critic writing a review of your life.
The literature actually refers to this as the spotlight effect.
The spotlight effect, I love that.
It is a highly documented cognitive bias. You genuinely perceive that your physical appearance, your minor social faux pas, or your awkward moments are being hyper-scrutinized by everyone in your vicinity.
It's so real in the moment.
It feels incredibly real. If you spill a single drop of coffee on your shirt during a meeting, the spotlight effect convinces your brain that every single person around the conference table has noticed it.
Oh, yeah, and that they've stopped paying attention to the presentation and are actively judging you as a sloppy, incompetent professional.
But the objective reality is that everyone else around the table is just thinking about the coffee stains on their own shirts, right?
Exactly. So why are we wired to do this to ourselves? Are we born this self-conscious? I mean, does a baby care if it spills coffee on itself?
Developmental psychology is remarkably clear on this point. Humans are not born caring about the opinions of others.
Not at all.
An infant or a toddler doesn't feel a shred of embarrassment if they throw a tantrum in a grocery store or wear mismatched socks.
You just don't care.
We have to actually learn self-consciousness. And unfortunately, we usually learn it through social trauma.
Social trauma. That sounds severe. Are we talking about capital T trauma or more everyday things?
It spans the spectrum. It can be severe childhood bullying, sure, but it can also be the everyday acute pain of childhood rejection.
Like playground stuff.
Yes. Being ostracized on the playground, being laughed at by the class when you read a word wrong, or facing harsh, unexpected criticism from a parent or teacher.
Because to a kid, that's their whole world.
Exactly. To a young child, the peer group is their entire world. When they experience the pain of being excluded or mocked, the developing brain doesn't just register it as a bummer.
What does it register as?
It registers it as a literal threat to physical survival.
Because in our evolutionary past, on that savanna we talked about, being separated from the tribe meant you were going to starve or get eaten.
Yes, social rejection equaled physical death.
Wow.
The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, fires with the exact same intensity for social isolation as it does for physical pain.
That explains why it hurts so much.
It's real pain.
Yeah.
So the brain undergoes what behavioral psychologists call one-trial learning.
One trial learning, meaning like the stove is so hot you only have to touch it once to never ever touch it again.
That's the perfect example. It only takes one really bad public humiliation for the lesson to stick forever.
It just rewires you instantly.
Yes. The emotional pain, the acute shame, the flush of embarrassment is so severe that the brain instantly wires a new chronic defense mechanism.
And what's the logic behind that defense?
The subconscious logic becomes, if I let my guard down, I will be attacked. If I don't perfectly conform to the group's expectations, I will be cast out and I will not survive.
So you just stay hyper-vigilant.
Exactly. The brain goes into a permanent low-level state of hypervigilance. In severe cases, if this chronic hypervigilance is left unchecked, it can escalate into debilitating panic disorders or severe social anxiety.
So you have to understand, the spotlight effect isn't just vanity. It isn't narcissism.
Not at all. It is a miscalibrated, traumatized survival mechanism trying to keep you safe in the tribe.
That makes me feel a lot more compassionate toward my own anxiety, honestly.
Mhm.
But here's where the source material takes a very sharp turn.
It does.
It doesn't just blame childhood bullies or evolutionary biology. Here's where it gets really interesting. It introduces a massive second-order insight that completely flips the script on why we feel so judged.
And honestly, reading it, it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Yeah, it shifts the blame back onto us.
It's perhaps the most challenging, confrontational, yet ultimately liberating concept in this entire synthesis of research.
Give it to me.
The text argues, relying on psychoanalytic theory, that we are terrified of the judgment of others, precisely because we are secretly judging them.
Yes, the call is coming from inside the house.
It really is.
We are walking around terrified of being categorized and shoved into boxes, but we are the ones aggressively doing the categorizing.
We are projecting.
It's like we are holding this massive, blinding flashlight, and we are constantly shining it in everyone's face, evaluating their clothes, critiquing their jobs, ranking their intelligence.
And what happens because of that?
Because we are constantly holding that flashlight, we are absolutely paranoid that everyone else is hiding a flashlight in their pocket, waiting to shine it on us.
That captures the Freudian concept of projection perfectly. Projection is an unconscious defense mechanism.
How does it work mechanically?
Well, the mechanics of it work like this. We take our own unaccepted feelings, our own deep insecurities, or our own excessively strict value filters. And because we cannot tolerate looking at them within ourselves.
You push them out.
Exactly. We unconsciously push them. We project them onto other people.
Yeah.
We have this internal shadow, a part of our ego that ruthlessly evaluates and ranks human beings.
And because we view the entire world through that specific judgmental filter, we assume the rest of the world is looking back at us through the exact same filter.
That's exactly it.
So the logic is, I judge people who wear cheap shoes. Therefore, when I walk into the room, everyone is looking at my shoes.
Yeah.
If I want that imaginary audience to go away, if I want the spotlight to finally turn off, I have to put down my own flashlight first. I have to stop holding other people to these ridiculous categorized standards.
You have to dismantle your own internal court of law before you can stop fearing the external jury.
That's so good. Dismantle your internal court of law.
And the source material actually breaks this phenomenon down into 4 specific types of projection.
Oh, right. Understanding the mechanics of these 4 types is crucial.
Because they illustrate exactly how our silent internal judgments manifest as screaming external paranoia.
The text provides a table for this, and I want to really dig into it because when I read these 4 types, I felt entirely called out.
Let's explore them.
Let's start with the first one. What is negative projection?
Negative projection occurs when there is a trait within yourself that you deeply hate, fear, or absolutely refuse to accept.
Like what?
Let's use a common workplace example.
Mhm.
Let's say deep down, you occasionally struggle with laziness or a lack of motivation.
Which is normal.
Completely normal. But your self-schema demands that you see yourself as a perfectly disciplined, tireless worker. You cannot tolerate the idea that you might be lazy.
So you hide it from yourself.
Yes. So your ego protects itself by projecting that self-hatred outward. You start hyper-criticizing others for the very thing you fear in yourself.
No, I've seen this happen so many times.
You look at a colleague who takes a slightly longer lunch break or who leaves exactly at 5:00 p.m. and your internal monologue goes wild. Look at them. They are so irresponsible, so lazy, they have no work ethic.
Okay, I see how I'm deflecting my own insecurity onto them. But how does my internal trash talking create the imaginary audience? How does that make me feel trapped?
Because your brain is acutely aware of how ruthlessly, how viciously you judge lazy people. You know the exact venom in your own thoughts.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, the result of this projection is that you live in absolute terror of making a single mistake.
Because I know what I'd say about me.
Right. You become obsessed with the idea that if you slip up, if you show even an ounce of fatigue, or if you ask for an extension on a project, the entire office will instantly judge you with the exact same venom you use on them.
You assume they will label you lazy and useless.
The harshness of your imaginary audience is nothing more than an exact mirror of the harshness of your own internal judgment.
Wow. It's like setting a psychological bear trap for yourself and then living in fear of stepping in it. You create the hostile environment you're afraid of.
Exactly.
What is the second type of projection?
The second is defensive projection. This is slightly different. It is rooted in repressing your own profound feelings of inferiority or inadequacy.
So feeling like you're not good enough.
Right. And instead of dealing with your own vulnerabilities and doing the hard work of building true self-esteem, you defensively look down on others to artificially elevate yourself.
So you just shove people down to make yourself taller.
Basically, you might constantly categorize people in your mind as unreliable, weak, naive, or unintelligent.
It's the classic bully mentality, right? I must be the smartest, most capable person in this room because everyone around me is a complete idiot.
Exactly. It is a fragile ego desperately trying to prop itself up by pushing others down. But again, it severely backfires.
How so?
The psychological result of defensive projection is a deep-seated, exhausting paranoia, because your entire worldview is built on sniffing out, exploiting, and looking down on the weaknesses of others.
You think everyone is doing that to you?
Yes. You become fundamentally convinced that everyone else operates the exact same way. You believe everyone is a predator looking for your hidden weaknesses.
You feel like everyone has X-ray vision and can see right through your competent facade.
It's terrifying.
You believe that any display of vulnerability, like asking for help or admitting you don't know something, will be met with immediate contempt and mockery.
You can never, ever let your guard down. You are constantly armored, which is incredibly isolating.
That sounds miserable. Now, the third type is oppositional projection.
Right. Oppositional projection. This happens when you deny your own aggressive, hostile, or pushy tendencies.
So you don't want to admit you're a difficult person.
Yes. Let's say you are actually quite dominating in conversations, or you have a fiercely competitive streak that borders on aggressive, but you desperately want to see yourself as a peaceful, agreeable, easygoing person.
You want to be the chill one.
Right. You repress the aggression. But where does it go? You project that hostility outward. You start viewing everyone else's neutral behavior as hostile, pushy, or confrontational.
Oh, I know people exactly like this.
Most of us do.
You say something completely innocuous, like, hey, did you finish that report? And they immediately react as if you just screamed at them. Why are you always attacking me? Why is everyone always trying to pick a fight with me?
Yes, playing the victim.
Meanwhile, they are the ones walking around with clenched fists, generating all the tension in the room.
The tragedy of oppositional projection is that the result is constant, agonizing vigilance. You interpret neutral facial expressions as glares.
Everything is a threat.
You interpret constructive feedback as character assassination.
Yeah.
You genuinely feel like the world is a dangerous, antagonistic place, completely unaware that you are the one broadcasting that antagonism into the environment.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of conflict.
It really is.
And the last one on the table, this one surprised me because it has the word positive in it, which makes it sound like a good thing.
positive projection. It sounds benign, but clinically, it is perhaps the most tragic of the four.
Tragic. How come?
It occurs when you repress your own potential, your own latent capacity for freedom, creativity, leadership, or joy.
So you're hiding your own light.
Exactly. Instead of owning your own brilliance and doing the terrifying work of actualizing it, you project it onto an idealized other.
Give me an example.
You look at a mentor, a celebrity, or even a confident friend, and you think they are just a perfect natural leader. They're so inherently free and creative. They have a special gift. I could never, ever be like that.
But, I still struggle to see why that is inherently bad. Isn't it good to admire people? Isn't it healthy to have role models?
Admiration is healthy.
Hmm.
Inspiration is healthy. But positive projection is fundamentally different.
How so?
Inspiration makes you want to take action. Positive projection is an abdication of your own agency.
Oh, you give your power away.
Yes. By projecting all the goodness, talent, and freedom onto someone else, you drain yourself of power. You make them superhuman so you have an excuse to remain subhuman.
Wow.
The psychological result is severe self-deprecation. You shrink yourself. You convince yourself that because you aren't that perfect, idealized person, you are fundamentally flawed and lacking in value.
You stay trapped in your narrow room because you believe only the special, chosen people are allowed to travel the world, write the book, or live freely.
Exactly.
This is wild. So whether we're talking about negative, defensive, oppositional, or positive projection, the mechanism is the same.
It's the exact same mechanism.
Every time we project, we are taking the remote control of our own emotional state and handing it over to an imaginary audience that we invented.
Yes.
The judgments we fear from the world are almost entirely the echoes of the judgments we are silently passing on the world.
That is the core revelation. If you want to empty the room of the imaginary audience, you have to stop stocking it with your projected judgments.
Okay, I am tracking with this completely. I realize I'm holding the flashlight. I recognize my negative projections. I start catching my schemas, decategorizing people, and dropping my internal judgment.
That's huge progress.
But I need to advocate for the listener here because there is a very real, very harsh reality check waiting for us outside that room.
What's that?
What if I do all this internal work, I finally step out of my narrow room, I book that solo trip around the world, and someone actually, literally criticizes me? What if I start living freely and my family actively disapproves, or my coworkers back home actually do gossip about me being irresponsible? Because projection is in my head, but literal spoken judgment from other humans is a reality.
It is a reality.
How does cognitive science protect me from real judgment?
That is the precise friction point where most people retreat. To navigate that, the synthesis of research introduces the ultimate tool from Adlerian psychology.
Oh, Adler. Okay.
Yes, a profound concept called the separation of tasks.
Separation of tasks.
Right. Once you understand that the judging eyes of strangers are mostly projections, you still need a mechanism to deal with the actual friction of intimate social life. The family, the coworkers, the friends.
The people who actually have opinions about us.
Exactly. The separation of tasks is that mechanism.
Sounds incredibly corporate, to be honest. Like something a project manager would say during a messy marketing campaign. How does task management apply to my mother gossiping about my life choices?
I know it sounds clinical, but it is actually a deeply profound philosophical boundary. Alfred Adler, one of the giants of psychology alongside Freud and Jung, proposed a golden rule for navigating all interpersonal relationships without losing your autonomy.
What's the rule?
You must constantly analyze every situation and ask yourself one defining question. Who ultimately takes responsibility for the result of this choice?
Who takes responsibility for the result?
Yes. By answering that, you draw a hard, impermeable line between your tasks and the tasks of others.
I need to play this out with a concrete example.
Let's do it.
Let's use the travel scenario from the text. I've lived in my hometown my whole life. I finally decide I'm going to travel to the other side of the world by myself for 6 months.
Okay, big step.
I'm excited, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it. I tell my parents, and they are horrified.
Classic.
They tell me it's irresponsible, it's dangerous, I'm throwing my career away, and they are visibly anxious and upset. How do I separate the tasks there? Because my choice is directly causing their pain.
Let's apply the golden rule rigorously. My actions, where I choose to travel, who I choose to meet, how I choose to spend my savings, the risks I am willing to take with my career, Whose tasks are those?
Well, they're mine. I mean, they are 100% my tasks.
Why?
Because I am the one who will ultimately experience the joy of the adventure or the struggle of running out of money or the consequences to my resume. I am solely responsible for the result.
Exactly. Now, look at the other side of the equation. How your parents evaluate that trip, whether they feel anxious about it, whether they disapprove, whether they complain to the neighbors about your choices. Whose task is that?
Right.
Who's generating those emotions and who must manage them?
Well, they are the ones feeling the anxiety, so by definition, managing that anxiety is their task.
Exactly. It is 100% their task. How someone else feels about your autonomous choices is entirely out of your control, and more importantly, it is outside of your responsibility.
That's a hard boundary to set.
It is. But Adler teaches that the root of almost all interpersonal conflict, and the primary reason we stay in the narrow room, is that we constantly intrude on other people's tasks, or we allow them to intrude on ours.
So they are intruding on my task by telling me not to go.
Yes, your parents are intruding on your task by trying to dictate your travel. But if you cancel the trip just to soothe their anxiety, you are intruding on their task.
Wow.
You are robbing them of the opportunity to manage their own emotions.
You know, I'm looking at this outline and I have to push back hard here.
Go ahead.
This theory feels incredibly aggressive.
Yeah.
It feels almost antisocial. If I just walk around telling my parents, my friends, and my coworkers, hey, your feelings about my actions are your problem, deal with it, I'm going to ruin my relationships.
I hear you.
Isn't it just human nature to want to be liked and to care about the feelings of the people we love? Won't I end up completely isolated if I operate this way?
That is the most common misinterpretation of Adler. And it is a very natural fear. But Adler addresses this head-on with a statement that is famously provocative.
What is it?
The source text quotes it directly as the core tenet of this philosophy. Freedom is being disliked by other people.
Freedom is being disliked. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It is.
Because we are socially, biologically conditioned to believe that being disliked is the ultimate failure.
It feels like failure to the old tribal hardware in our brains. But think about the logical alternative.
Which is people-pleasing.
Yes. Adler argues that trying to be liked by everyone, trying to constantly appease the emotional states of others, makes you a slave to them.
You're just working for them emotionally.
Right. If your primary goal in life is to avoid being disliked, you will enter every room constantly monitoring the mood. You will suppress your own desires, you will bite your tongue, you will stay in the safe job you hate, and you will eventually force yourself to lie to yourself just to meet the perceived expectations of society.
That is the exact architecture of the narrow room.
Exactly. Being disliked is not the goal. You aren't trying to be an arrogant jerk, obviously, but the willingness to be disliked, the acceptance that it is an inevitable byproduct of living authentically, is the absolute prerequisite for freedom.
So it's the difference between malicious disregard and healthy detachment.
Yes.
Like, I am not setting out to make you angry, but if my authentic choice to go to art school instead of medical school makes you angry, I have to let you be angry. I cannot fix it for you.
Precisely. You let them hold their task.
Oh.
And this leads to a very powerful cognitive reframe regarding the concept of gossip.
Oh, right, gossip.
If you practice the separation of tasks, how do you handle the whispers?
It's hard.
The text explains how to cognitively reconstruct our reaction to negative social feedback. Instead of viewing gossip or criticism as a failure of character, you should view it as objective, empirical proof of your vitality.
Gossip as a medal of honor. That is an incredibly defiant way to look at it.
But it is logically sound. Think about it. If you are conforming perfectly to the crowd, if you are staying quietly on the rails laid by your parents or society, no one will ever gossip about you.
Why would they? You're boring.
Right, you are invisible. You are completely predictable. But the moment you step off those rails, the moment you display independent vitality, creativity, and freedom, it inevitably causes friction with the conformist crowd.
They don't like it.
The crowd hates when someone proves the narrow room is an illusion. So the gossip isn't actually about you being bad or irresponsible. It is simply the crowd reacting to the gravitational impact of your newfound freedom.
It proves you have successfully stepped out.
Exactly.
I love the intellectual armor that provides, but the text also includes a very stark, practical warning about what happens to your body and your mind when you actually try to do this in real life for the first time.
Yes, the body rebels.
Because when you first practice the separation of tasks, it doesn't feel like a triumphant moment of freedom. It feels awful. The text calls it a healing crisis.
Yes, a profound healing crisis of guilt. When you have spent your entire life as a people pleaser, when your event schema for every interaction is based on monitoring and managing everyone's emotional state, you have wired your brain to believe that compliance equals safety.
So breaking that compliance feels like danger.
Right. The first time you actually draw a boundary, the first time you say, I am taking this trip, and your anxiety about it is your task, not mine, you will feel like a cold-hearted sociopath.
You will feel an intense, almost sickening wave of guilt.
Because your brain's old maladaptive schema is screaming, warning! You are abandoning the tribe. You are being selfish. You are going to be rejected and die alone.
Oh, yeah, your nervous system is going into shock because the old rules are being broken.
But the text emphasizes that this guilt is a phantom limb. You must push through this crisis. You must consciously repeat to yourself, this is their task. I respect them enough as adults to trust that they can handle their own emotions. You have to hold that boundary consistently for 1 to 2 weeks.
Just write it out.
If you hold the line, the guilt begins to fade. And what replaces it is not the isolation you feared, but true mutual respect.
Because you stop treating your loved ones like fragile children whose emotions you have to constantly manage.
Yes, and you start relating to them as capable, independent adults.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of profound theory. Understanding the separation of tasks logically is a game changer. Refragging gossip as a medal of honor is excellent armor.
It is.
But I want to get hyper-practical here. What do you do in the exact visceral moment when you are standing at the edge of your comfort zone, about to do something new, and your nervous system just completely rebels?
When panic hits.
Yeah. Say you've bought the plane ticket, you are standing at the airport terminal, and suddenly every alarm bell in your body is going off. Your heart is pounding, your palms are sweating, and your internal monologue is shouting, this is a massive mistake, turn back.
It's a terrifying moment.
Adler's philosophy is great, but it isn't helping my pounding heart in that exact moment. How do we rewire the actual machinery of the brain in real time?
This is where we must shift away from Adlerian philosophy and look at the precise mechanics of cognitive behavioral therapy. Specifically, a highly effective branch called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT.
ACT, okay.
To stop the physical panic, the first step in ACT is to understand what we call automatic thoughts.
Automatic thoughts. Are these the alarm bells, the voice in my head telling me to run away?
Yes. Whenever you attempt to leave the narrow room, your amygdala reflexively generates verbal warnings to protect you.
Like what?
If I go to this foreign country where I don't speak the language, I will be targeted and I will be in physical danger.
Or if I wear this bright outfit to the party, everyone will laugh at me and I will be ruined.
Exactly. These thoughts happen automatically. You do not consciously choose to think them. They are a biological defense mechanism firing off.
It makes me think of the concept of cognitive fusion. I've heard this analogy discussed in ACP circles before.
The pop-up ad analogy.
Yes. Cognitive fusion is like leaving a pop-up ad on your computer is a real FBI warning. You know those scam pop-ups that suddenly lock your browser screen, flashing red, and the text says, your computer has been infected with illegal material, the authorities are on their way, pay $500 immediately to unlock.
That is the perfect analogy for what happens in the brain.
Right.
When you are in a state of cognitive fusion, you fuse your identity with the automatic thought. You believe the scam pop-up ad is objective reality.
You literally think the FBI is coming.
Yes. When your brain flashes the thought, I will be laughed at, you believe it is a prophetic, undeniable truth. And because you believe it is real, your body reacts with real panic, which leads directly to avoidance behavior.
You stay home. You close the browser.
You stay in the narrow room. You pay the scammer by giving up your freedom, just to make the anxiety stop.
Right. And the goal of therapy isn't to configure your brain to never get pop-up ads again, because you can't control the internet and you can't control the automatic thoughts your mammalian brain generates.
No, you can't stop the thoughts from arriving.
The goal is to recognize what they are in the moment.
Precisely. You cannot stop the thoughts, but you can change your relationship to them. The technique for that in ACT is called diffusion.
Diffusion.
Yes, diffusion is the active practice of treating these terrifying automatic thoughts merely as transient linguistic phenomena flashing across the screen of your consciousness.
Just words.
They are just words. They're just a string of syllables generated by an anxious organ in your skull.
So diffusion is looking at the terrifying pop-up ad, taking a breath, noticing the weird font, seeing the fake logo, and saying, oh, that's just some pixels trying to scare me into handing over my credit card, and then simply closing the tab.
Exactly. You don't try to debate the pop-up ad.
You just observe it.
You do not argue with the pop-up. You don't try to prove it wrong with logic, because arguing with it just validates that it's worth arguing with. You just observe it without obeying it.
So how do we actually practice this?
Yeah. To make this highly practical, the source material provides a detailed framework, Table 3 in the text, which outlines 3 specific, everyday scenarios where we can practice diffusion and what CBT calls cognitive reframing.
Okay, let's break down those examples from Table 3 because this is where the rubber really meets the road for the listener. Scenario 1 is a classic nightmare for many.
That is it.
You have to enter a room full of strangers, a networking event, a party where you don't know the host well, a new class. What is the automatic thought, the pop-up ad that fires here?
The automatic thought is usually some variation of, if I try to approach anyone, they will think I'm awkward, they'll give me strange looks, they won't want to talk to me, and I will stand there completely rejected and humiliated.
And when you are fused with this thought, the resulting emotion is intense fear, often spiking your anxiety to 80 or 90% of its maximum capacity.
Exactly. Your heart is racing, you're hovering by the snack table, pretending to look at your phone.
So how do we diffuse that and reframe it into what the text calls an adaptive thought?
You step back and examine the evidence objectively, almost like a scientist. You ask yourself, have I literally been rejected by 100% of the people I've ever spoken to in my entire life?
No. You have friends. You've had successful conversations.
Right. Then you consciously apply the adaptive thought, drawing on what we've learned. Everyone in this room is busy worrying about themselves.
The spotlight effect in reverse.
Exactly. They are all dealing with their own imaginary audience. They are not actively monitoring my every move. I will simply go in and say hello. If someone doesn't want to talk, it's not a catastrophic rejection of my soul. It is simply a conversational mismatch.
That's so much more logical. By diffusing the absolute certainty of the disaster, the anxiety drops from 90% down to a manageable 30% or 40%.
It's still there, but you can act through it.
You lower the stakes from life or death to maybe slightly awkward. Okay, scenario 2 from the table. Wearing flashy clothes or doing something that makes you visibly stand out from the crowd.
The automatic thought here relies on the spotlight effect again. If I wear this, everyone will stare. I'll be gossiped about. People will think I'm arrogant, desperate for attention, or foolish. My social reputation will be ruined.
And that generates feelings of shame and a deep, urgent panic to conform.
The urge to just go back to the closet and put on the gray sweater, to blend in with the wallpaper.
But we know from Adler how to handle this now.
Yes, the adaptive thought directly integrates Adler's separation of tasks. You tell yourself, it is mathematically impossible to be liked by 10 out of 10 people.
Fact.
If I suppress my own style and run on the rails laid by society just to appease hypothetical strangers, I am living a lie. Therefore, if they do gossip, that gossip is a medal of honor. It is objective evidence that I'm actually living my own authentic life, not someone else's expectations.
You take the poison of their judgment and alchemy it into fuel. I love that. Okay, scenario 3. Meeting what the text calls difficult people.
Right.
Let's say someone has a really aggressive vibe, or they belong to a demographic or profession you traditionally avoid.
The automatic thought is driven purely by the role schema or person schema we discussed earlier. This person looks exactly like the kind of person who always causes trouble. My past experience tells me they are hostile, and I need to avoid them at all costs to stay safe.
The resulting emotion is high vigilance and an overwhelming behavioral urge to avoid them completely.
But if we just avoid them, we are trapped in our schemas forever. We never learn anything new, and our world shrinks.
Exactly. So what's the adaptive thought?
The adaptive thought calls upon Susan Fisk's continuum model. You pause the reflex and remind yourself, I cannot possibly know someone's internal world or their history based on their surface traits.
I can't read their mind.
Right. I cannot read their mind based on their job title or their jacket. I will choose to interact with them, engage in piecemeal processing, and judge them based on the actual reality of our interaction, not my brain's lazy initial schema.
Doing this internal reframing is incredibly vital work. But I notice the text also talks about external skills.
This it does.
Because sometimes the problem isn't just cognitive distortion in our heads. Sometimes we literally do not have the social tools to handle these situations. We've never been taught how to set a boundary.
That is a very astute point, and the research addresses it through what it calls social skills training, or SST.
Social skills training.
Sometimes the anxiety isn't just an imaginary pop-up ad. It's an accurate reflection of a lack of behavioral repertoire. If you have never stood up for yourself, The anxiety of trying to do it is warranted.
Right, you're anxious because you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
SST involves practical, step-by-step learning to build those muscles. It starts with modeling, watching how someone else confidently handles a difficult conversation.
I know what.
Then role-play practicing what you're going to say in a safe environment, maybe with a therapist or a trusted friend. And finally, receiving feedback.
So it's literally practicing the physical words of setting a boundary. Like practicing saying out loud, no, I don't have the capacity to take on that project right now. Or learning how to state your opinion without immediately apologizing for having it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You build the neuromuscular memory for autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And the text highly emphasizes that while you're building these new skills, you will inevitably stumble.
Of course.
You will fall back into old habits. You will seek approval. You will say yes when you mean no, and you will feel incredibly awkward. When that happens, the most important tool is self-compassion.
Because the instinct is to beat yourself up. I'm so weak. I failed again. I should just give up.
And beating yourself up just reinforces the negative self-schema. When that deep-seated desire for approval flares up, self-compassion is the anchor.
The text provides a specific mindfulness technique for this, right?
Yes. When you feel that panic of wanting to please someone, don't judge it. Notice your physical sensations. Notice that you are holding your breath or your shoulders are up by your ears.
Just observe the body.
Gently, objectively label the feeling. Say to yourself, I am experiencing the urge to seek approval right now. That makes sense. I've done it my whole life.
And
Then take a deep, slow breath to anchor your consciousness back to the here and now rather than spiraling into a catastrophic future where everyone hates you.
it's treating yourself with the exact same patience and grace you would give a good friend who is learning how to ride a bike for the first time.
That's a beautiful way to think of it.
Okay, so we've rewired the internal monologue. We've learned how to diffuse the pop-up ads. We understand Adlerian boundaries. We've practiced self-compassion.
We've done the internal work.
Now it is time to actually take physical action. How do we take all this theory and use it to expand our physical boundaries out into, as the text says, the other side of the world?
To do this safely and systematically, the source material maps out what behavioral science calls the psychological zone theory.
Psychological zone theory.
It provides a literal geographical map of our psychological states. There are 4 distinct zones, and visualizing where you currently live, where you are trying to go, is the crucial first step to moving out of the room.
Let's map this out for the listener. Picture a series of concentric circles. The very center, zone 1, is the comfort zone.
Yes, the comfort zone is exactly what it sounds like. It is an environment of 0 stress and 0 risk. You have highly predictable routines, you only interact with familiar people who agree with you, and you know exactly what is going to happen every single day.
Biologically, it feels incredibly safe because the brain doesn't have to burn any extra calories predicting the environment.
Right.
But the massive downside is that it is the definition of the narrow room. There is absolutely 0 growth in the comfort zone. You are safe, but you are stagnant.
To grow, you must leave it.
Ugh.
But immediately outside the boundary of the comfort zone lies the second circle, the fear zone.
The barrier wall.
When you first attempt to leave your familiar routines, when you go to book that flight or sign up for that class, you plunge into the fear zone. This space is characterized by a spike in cortisol.
It's stressful.
It is dominated by excuses, a profound lack of confidence, and a hypersensitivity to the opinions of others. This is the exact zone where the imaginary audience screams the absolute loudest.
This is where most people turn back, isn't it?
Unquestionably.
They step out the front door, the harsh wind of the fear zone hits them, they hear the internal excuses, I don't have enough time, it costs too much money, I don't know anyone, people think I'm crazy, and they immediately retreat back to the couch in the comfort zone.
The vast majority of human potential dies in the fear zone. But if you use the cognitive tools we've discussed, if you diffuse those excuses as mere pop-up ads, if you separate your tasks from the judgment of others, you can push through the friction of the fear zone.
And what's on the other side?
You enter the third circle, the learning zone, which is also called the stretch zone.
The stretch zone. This sounds like the sweet spot.
It is where the magic happens. The learning zone is characterized by moderate, manageable tension.
So not overwhelming panic.
No, just moderate tension. You are actively expanding your skills, you are entering unknown environments, you are dealing with novel challenges, but you have the cognitive capacity to handle them.
This is the zone where you actually navigate that Tokyo train station. You might get on the wrong train once, but you figure it out. You are stretching your capabilities, building new neural pathways without snapping.
Exactly. But we have to be incredibly careful here because there is a fourth zone right past the stretch zone, and it is a cliff.
Yes, the outermost circle is the panic zone.
If you push yourself too far, too fast, without the proper skills, you enter the panic zone. This is a state of severe psychological and physiological overload.
It's too much.
The sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive, the stress is too high, your cognitive coping mechanisms completely fail, and it leads to paralysis, trauma, and dysfunction.
Can you give an example of catapulting into the panic zone?
Sure. If someone who struggles with severe social anxiety and has never left their small hometown decides, I'm going to cure my anxiety by dropping myself in the middle of a chaotic foreign megacity with no itinerary, no money, and no support system,
Oh no.
they will not learn anything. They will hit the panic zone immediately. The trauma of that overwhelming experience will reinforce their worst maladaptive schemas, send them rushing all the way back to the core of the comfort zone, and they may never attempt to leave again.
So the ultimate question is, how do you reliably and safely get from the comfort zone through the fear zone into the stretch zone without accidentally throwing yourself into the panic zone?
The mechanism for this, heavily utilized in cognitive behavioral therapy, is called behavioral experiments.
Behavioral experiments.
Yes, behavioral experiments are the bridge. Instead of taking massive, reckless, heroic leaps, you scientifically test your catastrophic hypotheses, those what-if automatic thoughts, with tiny, controlled, real-world experiments.
Give me a concrete example. What does a tiny behavioral experiment look like for someone trying to eventually travel the world?
If your long-term goal is global travel, but your current self-schema says, I'm too fragile and awkward to navigate a foreign environment, you start incredibly small. You set a micro goal.
Like what?
The text suggests an experiment like asking a stranger for directions in a foreign language. But if you aren't abroad yet, you do it at home. I'm going to go to a brand new cafe across town, enter completely alone, order a complex drink, and sit by myself for 15 minutes.
And the CBT aspect is that you write down your hypothesis before you go, right?
Right.
You literally document the fear.
Exactly.
Hypothesis: if I sit alone in this trendy cafe, everyone will stare at me, the barista will judge me, and I will look like a pathetic loser.
Yes. You write down the absolute worst-case catastrophic prediction generated by the fear zone. Then you run the experiment.
You just do it.
You go to the cafe.
You sit.
You feel the anxiety, but you stay. And then, crucially, you act as the scientist and analyze the objective result.
Did the catastrophe occur?
Did the music stop? Did everyone point and laugh at you? Did the barista mock you? No. You will gather objective data that people were mostly helpful, or far more likely, completely indifferent.
They were just staring at their phones, drinking their own coffee. The imaginary audience wasn't even looking at you.
Yes. And this objective data, the undeniable empirical fact that the catastrophe did not occur, does something incredibly profound in the brain.
It updates the software.
It actively rewrites your self-schema. You gather evidence that you are capable and that the world is not as hostile as your projections made it seem.
That's amazing.
By repeating these small, successful behavioral experiments, you systematically release the brakes on your physical mobility. You expand your learning zone inch by inch, city by city, until it eventually encompasses the entire globe.
That is such a grounded, practical approach. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing to run tiny 15-minute experiments.
Yeah.
But this brings us to the final beautiful piece of the puzzle. Let's say you've done the work. You've run the experiments. You are out traveling in the learning zone. You are physically free of your own fears. The imaginary audience is gone.
You made it.
How do you actually engage with the people you meet out there in the world without falling back into those old automatic judgmental schemas we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive? How do we really connect?
That is the ultimate test of this entire process. It is one thing to be physically free from anxiety. It is an entirely different level of mastery to be relationally free.
So how do we do that?
To solve this, the synthesis introduces the brilliant framework of nonviolent communication, or NVC, developed by psychologist Dr. Marshall Rosenberg.
NVC. I've heard the term thrown around in conflict resolution circles, but how does it connect to everything we've talked about with schemas and projection?
NVC is the behavioral linguistic antidote to projection and schemas. The core paradigm shift in NVC is moving away from the traditional ego-driven game that humanity plays, the game of who is right, and replacing it with a totally different collaborative game. What makes life wonderful?
Who is right versus what makes life wonderful. That completely changes the objective of a conversation.
It changed the entire architecture of how you view other people. Think about our schemas and our projections. They're almost entirely designed to figure out who is right, who is wrong, who is normal, who is abnormal, who is good, who is bad.
It is a rigid system of moral judgment.
Yes. NVC asks us to completely abandon the habit of evaluating people morally and instead focus entirely on communicating what we value and what we need.
Explain the distinction there. What is the difference between a moralistic judgment and a value judgment?
A moralistic judgment condemns someone's character or behavior as objectively right or wrong based on your own internal subjective rulebook.
Okay. An example.
It is looking at a person and saying, you are a lazy person, or you are being incredibly rude, or your culture's way of doing this is backwards. It is an attack on their identity. A value judgment, on the other hand, expresses what you value and what you need without attacking the essence of the other person.
Can you give me an example of how that sounds in a real tense travel moment? Say you are dealing with a hotel clerk who is being very dismissive.
If you use a moralistic judgment, driven by your frustrated schema, you might snap and say you are being incredibly rude and unprofessional.
And what happens then?
If you say that, you create an immediate, impenetrable psychological wall. They will become defensive, and the conflict escalates.
So what's the NVC approach?
A value judgment under NVC requires you to look inward first. You might say, I am feeling really exhausted from traveling, and I really value clarity and a bit of patience right now as I try to understand this booking. Can we slow down?
Wow. One is an aggressive attack on their character. The other is a vulnerable statement about your own internal needs.
Exactly.
It removes the hostility entirely, making it safe for them to respond with empathy instead of defensiveness. The text uses these two very specific animal metaphors to visualize this difference in language, doesn't it?
Yes. Rosenberg famously categorized these two ways of speaking as jackal language and giraffe language.
I love a good metaphor. What does jackal language sound like? Because I'm pretty sure I speak it fluently when I'm stressed.
Most of us do.
Yeah.
It is the default language of our schemas and our fear. Jackal language is the language of attack, classification, demand, and surface-level differences.
It is the language of the sorting hat.
Yes. When you are operating in jackal language, you are constantly asking, what is wrong with them? Are they normal or abnormal? Do they deserve punishment or reward? It is a language of division that operates purely on fear, projection, and control.
So jackal language is basically living inside your narrow room, terrified and shouting at people through the window to stay away.
That's a great image.
Then what is giraffe language? Why a giraffe?
Rosenberg chose the giraffe because it has the largest heart of any land mammal and because its tall neck gives it a broad, far-reaching perspective.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Giraffe language is the language of empathy. Instead of classifying people based on their outward behavior or their labels, it focuses on looking past the behavior to the underlying feelings and universal human needs that are driving that behavior.
So instead of using jackal language to say, you are an angry, hostile person, stay away from me, you would use giraffe language, at least internally, to look deeper and ask, this person is acting aggressively? Are they feeling terrified right now? Is their need for safety or respect not being met?
Precisely. You bypass the surface-level schema, you ignore the armor, and you connect directly with the vulnerable human being underneath.
That is amazing.
The text concludes with a very profound observation about this dynamic. It argues that by deliberately practicing giraffe language, by seeking the feelings and needs behind the actions of strangers, we can connect with anyone, in any culture, anywhere on Earth.
And we do so not out of fear, not out of the shame of the imaginary audience, and not out of polite social obligation, but from a pure, innate human desire to contribute to one another's well-being. That is an incredibly hopeful place to land. Let's synthesize this whole journey for the listener, because we have covered a massive amount of psychological ground today.
It's been a deep dive, for sure.
What we've learned is that dropping your assumptions and stepping out of your narrow room isn't about adopting toxic positivity or just deciding to have good vibes. It is a rigorous, mechanical, scientific process.
It is a systematic, daily practice of dismantling your own cognitive barriers.
Right. It starts with radical self-awareness, recognizing your brain's automatic schemas, catching the way it tries to instantly sort complex human beings into lazy, stereotypical categories.
And then It requires the bravery to drop the flashlight of projection.
Realizing that the judgmental, terrifying eyes of the imaginary audience are just your own internal judgments reflecting back at you in the mirror.
From there, the internal work moves into external action, applying Adler's separation of tasks to realize that someone else's emotional reaction to your authentic life is entirely their responsibility to manage, not yours.
It's about diffusing those automatic anxious thoughts, treating them like cheap computer pop-up ads instead of absolute prophecies of doom.
It's about running small, safe, scientific behavioral experiments to step out of the comfort zone, push through the friction of the fear zone, and expand into the learning zone.
And finally, when you are out there in the world, it is about using nonviolent communication, the giraffe language, to connect with humanity based on shared, universal needs rather than superficial, dividing labels.
And the ultimate result of committing to this process is truly transformative. The world literally shifts around you.
It stops being a threatening, hyper-scrutinized arena of judgment where you have to constantly defend your ego and hide your flaws.
Instead, it becomes an infinite universe of freedom, curiosity, and peace. It becomes a place where you can easily, joyfully travel to the other side of the world to meet amazing people simply because you are no longer burdened by the agonizing fear of their judgment or the heavy weight of your own.
I cannot think of a better goal than that. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over today as you go about your routine.
I love this.
The next time you walk into a room, whether it's a high-stakes meeting, a crowded cafe, or a party full of strangers, and you feel that familiar, tight, suffocating wave of anxiety, that everyone is evaluating your outfit, your posture, or your worth, I want you to pause.
Just stop for 1 second.
Stop for one single second and ask yourself a very hard question. Who am I secretly judging right now?
Drop your own gavel first.
Drop your own gavel first, put down your flashlight, and watch how quickly the imaginary audience disappears. Step out of your narrow room today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.